My name is Elise Foote, and my favorite poem is number 13, Dedications by Adrienne Rich. My experience with poetry began when I was a little girl. I remember my grandpa reading poetry out loud to my grandmother every single day on their front porch. And the way he read the poems made me think that without these poems, his life would be completely different, that they were a part of him in some way. And I didn't understand his passion for literature until I learned how to read myself. And I discovered that I shared a similar enthusiasm for the written word. But I'd always had trouble articulating my feelings about literature. And so when I came across this poem, I felt like I had found all of my feelings about poetry said in words that I could never find. I found this poem late at night in the Union, somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning. I'm not really sure. And I was doing my homework after one of my worst days at Davidson. I was tired, stressed, upset. I had just been crying, and nothing was going well for me that day. And then this poem just sort of fell into my lap, and this beautiful poetic voice came out of the page saying, "I know you are reading this poem." I went through a series of scenarios that I identified with deeply, especially the first scene, which talks about someone working in the office late at night, which was similar to what I was doing in the Union at that exact moment. I didn't really know much about Adrienne Rich before reading her poems for class, but I knew that she dealt with the personal and the impersonal. And I think that idea, coupled with this theme of connections, is really what this poem is about. It's about connections between people, between poem and reader, and between this I and you. She starts each scene with, "I know you are reading this poem." And the repetition of that line throughout the whole poem turns into something quite comforting. It's this constant and all of these changing scenes that include things like having babies and old age and learning new languages and having your heart broken and all of these things that are part of the human condition, but that make being a human particularly difficult. And what's constant in the poem is that everything is always changing, with the exception of the way we look at literature and the way we rely on literature as a source of comfort, as a source of sustenance in particular. Because my relationship with literature is more of someone looking for comfort, sustenance, and inspiration, especially when everything feels out of control and everything is changing. And as I continued to read this poem, it made me think about how many ways you can say, "I know you are reading this poem." And what continues to stand out to me is the first part, the "I know you," because this poetic voice that kind of comes off of the page is really addressing you, the reader. It's saying, "I know you, I see you, and all of these things may apply to you in some way, but I'm still here, and you're still here, and you're still reading." And I think that's what's really the most comforting aspect of this poem for me. And it's the way the poem continues to provide comfort to the reader that really sits well with me. I identify with a number of these situations in a wide variety of ways because they are deeply personal and deeply human, but also general enough they are universal. So the poem articulates these scenarios of the human condition, saying, "This is what it's like to be a person. It's hard. It's really difficult sometimes, but I'm still here. I'm still reading. I see you, and this is your life, and I am here with you." And after I read that poem, I came to Phi Hall, which is where I am right now, because this is where I come when I've had a bad day and I just want to read or write or just meditate for a little bit. And I read that poem over and over again until I started to feel a little bit better about the world again. So I felt it was only appropriate to come back. Number 13, Dedications, from An Atlas of a Difficult World by Adrienne Rich. I know you are reading this poem, late, before leaving your office at the one intense yellow lamp spot and the darkening window, in the lassitude of a building, faded to quiet, long after rush hour. I know you are reading this poem in a bookstore far from the ocean, on a gray day of early spring, faint flakes driven across the plain's enormous spaces around you. I know you are reading this poem in a room where too much has happened for you to bear, where the bedclothes lie in stagnant coils on the bed, the open valise speaks a flight, but you cannot leave yet. I know you are reading this poem as the underground train loses momentum, and before running up the stairs towards a new kind of love your life has never allowed. I know you are reading this poem by the light of a television screen, where soundless images jerk and slide while you wait for the newscast from the Intifada. I know you are reading this poem in a waiting room of eyes met and unmeeting, of identity with strangers. I know you are reading this poem by fluorescent light and the fatigue and boredom of the young who are count themselves out at too early an age. I know you are reading this poem through your failing sight, the thick lenses enlarging these letters beyond all meaning, yet you read on, because even the alphabet is precious. I know you are reading this poem as you pace beside the stove, warming milk, a crying child on your shoulder, a book in your hand, because life is short and you, too, are thirsty. I know you are reading this poem that is not in your language, guessing at some words while others keep you reading, and I want to know which words they are. I know you are reading this poem, listening for something torn between bitterness and hope, turning back once again to the task you cannot refuse. I know you are reading this poem because there is nothing else left to read. There, where you have landed, stripped as you are,